$2 silver. That's all Rhett Mercer had left when he bought the mail-order bride nobody else wanted. The saloon erupted in laughter. She was too weak, too soft, too broken for Montana. But the men who mocked her that night had no idea what kind of woman stood shaking in those threadbare clothes. And neither did Rhett. What began as the most humiliating transaction of two desperate lives would become the fight that saved an entire valley from a tyrant's grip. This is their story. If you want to see how far $2 silver and a stubborn refusal to quit can go, stay with me until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. The saloon stank of tobacco, sweat, and bitter ale. Rhett Mercer stood near the back corner, shoulders hunched, hat pulled low. He didn't want to be here. Didn't want every man in Timber Ridge seeing what he'd come to. But there was no other choice. The ranch was dying, the cattle were starving, and winter was closing in like a fist. On the makeshift stage near the bar, a thin man in a dusty suit called himself a marriage broker. He had 3 women with him, mail-order brides, hauled in from back east on promises of new lives and decent men. The room was packed, cowboys, miners, drifters, all of them sizing up the women like livestock at auction. Rhett watched the first bride step forward. Young, pretty, clean dress. She didn't even finish her introduction before a ranch hand named Coulter slapped down $20 and claimed her. The crowd cheered. The second bride went just as fast. $30 to a freighter with a thick beard and a loud laugh. Then came the third. She was older than the others, maybe 30. Her dress was faded gray, patched at the elbows. Her hair was pulled back tight, dark strands falling loose around a pale, exhausted face. She didn't smile, didn't even look up, just stood there with her hands folded, staring at the floorboards like she was waiting for something to end. "Elena Whitmore," the broker announced, his voice losing some of its shine. "From Boston, educated, good with numbers, speaks 3 languages." Silence. Someone in the crowd laughed. "What the hell's she gonna do with 3 languages out here? Talk to the cows?" More laughter. Rhett felt his jaw tighten. The broker cleared his throat. "She's a hard worker, reliable, looking for a fresh start." "She looks half dead already," another voice called out. "What kind of fresh start is that?" The woman, Elena, didn't flinch, didn't react. But Rhett saw her fingers tighten, knuckles going white. "Come on, boys," the broker said, forcing a grin. "Somebody's got to need a bride? $20? That's a fair price." Nothing. 15? Still nothing. The laughter was dying now, replaced by something worse. Pity. Contempt. Rhett knew that look. He'd seen it plenty lately. It was the look men gave you when they knew you were finished. $10, the broker said quietly. $10, and she's yours. Rhett's chest tightened. He had $2 silver in his pocket. That was it. $2 left from selling off his last decent horse. $2 that were supposed to buy flour, salt, maybe some lamp oil if he got lucky. But standing there, watching this woman get torn apart by a room full of strangers, something in him cracked. He stepped forward. The room went quiet. "I'll take her," Rhett said. Heads turned. The broker blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll take her. $2. The silence shattered into chaos. Men shouted, laughed, slapped tables. Someone yelled that $2 wouldn't even buy a sick mule. Another said Rhett must be more desperate than they thought. The broker looked genuinely confused. "Sir, I said 10, and I got 2, Rhett said flatly. "That's what I got. You want it or not?" The broker glanced at Elena. She was staring at Rhett now, wide-eyed, like she couldn't decide if he was rescuing her or making things worse. The broker sighed, rubbed his face, then nodded. "Fine. $2. She's yours." Rhett pulled the coins from his pocket and dropped them into the broker's hand. The man pocketed them without ceremony, muttering something about bad luck and poor business. Rhett ignored him. He looked at Elena. "You got a coat?" She nodded slowly. "Go get it. We're leaving." She hesitated, then moved toward a small pile of luggage near the stage. The room was still buzzing with mockery. Rhett heard every word. Heard them say he'd just bought himself a corpse. Heard them say she'd be dead before spring. Heard them say he was a fool. Maybe he was. Elena returned with a thin wool coat and a single carpet bag. She stood beside him, silent, waiting. Rhett glanced at her once, then turned toward the door. Let's go. They walked out into the cold Montana night. The laughter followed them all the way to the hitching post where Rhett's wagon waited. It wasn't much. A rickety flatbed with a canvas cover and 2 tired mules. Elena climbed up without a word. Rhett took the reins and urged the mules forward. They rode in silence for a long time. The town disappeared behind them. The road was rough, cutting through open prairie toward the dark shape of mountains in the distance. Stars spread across the sky, cold and distant. Elena sat stiff beside him, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Finally she spoke. "Why did you do that?" Her voice was quiet, steady, not what he expected. Rhett kept his eyes on the road. "Needed a wife. You could have waited, saved more money." "Don't have more money." She was quiet again. Then, "You spent your last $2 on me." It wasn't a question. Rhett didn't answer. "They said you're a rancher." "Was." "What happened?" Rhett's jaw worked. He didn't talk about this. Didn't talk about the drought that killed half his herd. Didn't talk about the debts piling up faster than he could count. Didn't talk about the land baron, Victor Hale, who wanted his property and was willing to strangle him dry to get it. "Life happened," he said finally. Elena nodded slowly, like that was answer enough. They rode in silence again. The wagon creaked. The mules plodded. The wind was sharp. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Rhett glanced at her. "What?" "You bought me. For $2. I assume you expect something in return." He frowned. "I expect you to survive. That's it." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "I can do more than survive," she said quietly. Rhett looked back at the road. "We'll see." The ranch appeared an hour later, a dark smudge against the hills. As they got closer, Elena could make out the details. A small cabin with a sagging porch. A barn that leaned hard to one side. Fences patched with rope and rotting wood. Cattle scattered across a dry field, ribs showing through their hides. Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop near the cabin. He climbed down, then offered Elena a hand. She took it, stepped down, and looked around. "This is it," Rhett said. Elena studied the property in silence. Her face gave nothing away. Rhett waited for her to say something, waited for her to ask what the hell she'd gotten herself into, waited for her to demand he take her back to town. Instead, she picked up her carpet bag and walked toward the cabin. "Where do I sleep?" she asked. Rhett blinked. Inside, there's a bed." "Just one?" "Yeah." "Then where do you sleep?" "Barn." She stopped, turned to face him. "You're giving me the cabin?" "You're my wife. Legally, anyway." Elena's expression was unreadable. "That's not necessary. It's done." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. "Thank you." Rhett waved her off. "Get some rest. We start early." He turned toward the barn, but her voice stopped him. "Rhett." He looked back. "I meant what I said. I can do more than survive." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and kept walking. Inside the cabin, Elena set her bag on the floor and looked around. One room. A bed shoved against the wall. A table with 2 chairs. A cold stove. Bare shelves. Dirt floor. It was smaller than the pantry in her father's Boston house. But it was hers. For now, anyway. She sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. Her hands were trembling. She pressed them together, hard, until they stopped. She would not cry. She had cried enough on the train west, cried enough in the filthy boarding house where the marriage broker kept them locked up like animals, cried enough when she realized this was what her life had become. She was done crying. Elena stood, walked to the stove, and opened it. No wood? She went outside, found a small pile of split logs near the porch, and carried an armful back inside. She built a fire the way her mother's cook had taught her years ago. The flames caught, spread, filled the cabin with flickering light. She sat at the table and opened her carpet bag. Inside were 3 dresses, all patched, a comb, a small leather-bound notebook, and a pencil, a single photograph of her parents, both dead now. She set the photograph on the table, stared at it for a moment, then closed the bag. Tomorrow, she would see what kind of disaster she'd married into. Tonight, she would sleep. In the barn, Rhett lay on a pile of straw, staring at the rafters. The mules shifted in their stalls. An owl called somewhere outside. His mind wouldn't shut off. He kept seeing Elena's face in the saloon, kept hearing the laughter, kept wondering what the hell he'd just done. He didn't know her. Didn't know if she could cook, clean, work. Didn't know if she'd last a week out here. But when he'd seen her standing on that stage, shoulders straight even as men tore her apart, he'd recognized something. She wasn't broken. Not yet. And neither was he. Morning came cold and gray. Rhett was up before dawn, feeding the mules, checking the cattle. Half of them looked worse than they had yesterday. He needed to move them to better pasture, but better pasture didn't exist. The drought had burned everything dry. What grass was left belonged to Victor Hale, who owned half the valley and wanted the other half. Rhett was filling a water trough when he heard the cabin door open. He looked up. Elena stepped out, dressed in the same patched gray dress, hair pulled back tight. She walked toward him, steady and deliberate. "Morning," she said. "Morning." "What needs doing?" Rhett straightened. "You don't have to. I'm not here to sit inside and wait for things to get better. What needs doing?" He studied her face. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. But her jaw was set, her gaze direct. She meant it. "Chickens need feeding," he said finally. "There's a coop behind the barn. Feeds in a bucket by the door." Elena nodded and headed for the barn. Rhett watched her go, then shook his head and went back to work. By mid-morning, Elena had fed the chickens, collected eggs, swept the cabin, and started a pot of weak coffee on the stove. She found a sack of beans in the corner and began soaking them for supper. Then she walked outside and stood at the edge of the property, looking out over the dry fields. Rhett was fixing a fence near the road. She walked over to him. "How much land do you have?" she asked. 300 acres. Used to be more." "What happened?" "Sold it. Needed cash." "To who?" Rhett's face darkened. "Victor Hale." Elena frowned. "Who's that?" "Man who owns most of the valley. Owns the bank. Owns the railway depot. Decides who gets water rights and who doesn't. Right now he's deciding I don't." "Why?" "Because he wants this land, and he's patient. Figures if he waits long enough, I'll starve and he can buy the rest for nothing." Elena looked back at the cattle, thin and weak. "How much do you owe him?" Rhett hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want to know what we're fighting." "We?" Elena met his eyes. "You bought me. That makes this my fight too." Rhett stared at her. Then, slowly, he said, $800, due in 3 months. Elena's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Yeah, I know." "What happens if you don't pay?" "He takes the ranch, legally." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Show me the books." "What?" "Your financial records, debts, income, expenses. I want to see everything." Rhett frowned. "Why?" "Because I'm good with numbers. And if we're going to survive this, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Rhett didn't know what to say. He'd expected her to fold within a week, expected her to beg him to take her back to town. Instead, she was standing here asking to see his books like she was planning a damn war. "They're in the cabin," he said finally. "Drawer under the bed." Elena nodded and walked back toward the cabin. Rhett watched her go, then returned to the fence. He didn't know what the hell she thought she could do with a pile of unpaid bills and bad loans, but at least she was trying. Inside the cabin, Elena pulled out a battered ledger and spread it across the table. The pages were stained, dog-eared, filled with Rhett's cramped handwriting. She worked through it slowly, line by line. It was worse than she'd thought. Rhett owed money to the bank, to the feed store, to the blacksmith, to a dozen small creditors scattered across the valley. The total debt was over $1,000, not $800. And his income was almost nothing. He'd sold cattle at a loss last season, sold land, sold equipment. He was bleeding out. But Elena also saw something else. The cattle Rhett still had were good stock. If he could get them to market in decent condition, they'd fetch a strong price. The problem was the local market. Every rancher in the valley sold through the railway depot, which Victor Hale controlled. Hale set the prices. Hale took his cut. Hale made sure no one got ahead. Elena sat back, thinking. There had to be another way. Another market, another route. She spent the rest of the day studying the ledger, making notes in her small notebook. By evening, she had an idea. It was risky, maybe impossible, but it was something. When Rhett came in for supper, she had beans and cornbread waiting. He sat down, surprised, and ate in silence. Elena ate across from him, waiting. Finally, he spoke. "You looked at the books?" "I did." "And?" Elena set down her fork. "You're right, it's bad, but it's not hopeless." Rhett snorted. "You see something I don't?" "Yes. You're selling to the wrong market." He frowned. "There's only one market, Hale's Depot." "Not true. There's a railhead in Lewiston, 200 miles north. Cattle prices there are 30% higher because they're shipping directly to Chicago, not through Hale's middlemen." Rhett shook his head. "Lewiston's a death trap. The drive goes through the mountains. Bad terrain, worse weather, and even if we made it, we don't have enough cattle to make the trip worth it. What if we combined herds, partnered with other ranchers? No one's going to risk it. Hale owns them. They sell through him or they don't sell at all." Elena leaned forward. "Then we convince them. Show them the numbers. Show them what they're losing every season by staying under Hale's control." Rhett stared at her. "You're serious?" "I am. You've been here one day. And I've already figured out more than you have in the last year." Rhett's jaw tightened. Then, slowly, he laughed. It was a rough, bitter sound, but it was a laugh. "You got guts," he said. "I'll give you that." Elena didn't smile. "I didn't come here to die quietly. If we're going to lose, we lose fighting." Rhett studied her across the table. This woman who'd been bought for $2. This woman who'd been mocked and humiliated and left for dead by a room full of strangers. She wasn't giving up. She was digging in. "All right," he said finally. "We'll try it your way. But if this falls apart, it's on both of us." Elena nodded. "Agreed." They finished supper in silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter was coming, and so was the fight. The next morning, Rhett and Elena rode into Timber Ridge together. The town was small. One main street, a handful of shops, a church, and the saloon where Rhett had bought her. People stared as they passed. Whispers followed them like smoke. They stopped at the feed store first. The owner, a man named Callahan, looked up from his counter and frowned. "Mercer, didn't expect to see you so soon." "Need to talk," Rhett said. Callahan glanced at Elena, then back at Rhett. "About what?" Elena stepped forward. "About a cattle drive to Lewiston." Callahan blinked. "Lewiston? You out of your mind?" "No, but we will be if we keep selling through Hale." Callahan's face darkened. "Careful what you say. Hale hears that kind of talk. He'll make your life hell." "He's already doing that," Elena said calmly. "We're just offering an alternative." Callahan looked at Rhett. "This your idea?" "Hers," Rhett said. "But I'm backing it." Callahan shook his head. "You're both crazy. Lewiston Drive's a nightmare. Half the ranchers who try it lose cattle in the mountains. The other half get robbed by bandits." "Or they make it and triple their profits," Elena said. "We've done the math. If we combine herds and share costs, the risk drops and the profit margin increases. You in or not?" Callahan stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Then he laughed. "Lady, I don't know where you came from, but you got some nerve." "That's not an answer." Callahan's smile faded. He looked at Rhett again. "You trust her?" Rhett hesitated, then he nodded. "Yeah, I do." Callahan sighed. "All right, I'll think about it. But you better talk to the others first. If they're not in, I'm not risking it alone." Elena nodded. "We will." They left the feed store and made their way through town, stopping at every ranch and business they could find. Most people laughed them off. Some got angry. A few listened. By the end of the day, they had 3 ranchers willing to consider the drive. Callahan, a young widow named Ruth Tanner, and an older man named Sam Ford who'd been ranching longer than Rhett had been alive. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As they rode back to the ranch, Elena was quiet. Rhett glanced at her. "You all right?" She nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how many people told us no today." Rhett grunted. "That's how it goes." "It doesn't have to." "What do you mean?" Elena looked at him. Fear is a habit. Hale spent years teaching this valley to be afraid. If we break that habit, even once, everything changes. Rhett didn't know what to say to that, so he just kept writing. That night, Elena sat at the table with her notebook, sketching plans. Supply routes, weather windows, cost projections. Rhett watched her from across the room, mending a saddle strap. You really think this'll work? He asked. Elena looked up. I think it's our only chance. And if it doesn't? Then we go down swinging. Rhett nodded slowly. Fair enough. Elena went back to her notes. Rhett went back to his strap. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. 2 weeks passed. Elena and Rhett worked the ranch from dawn to dark. They fixed fences, tended cattle, rationed supplies. Elena proved herself tougher than anyone expected. She learned to ride, handle livestock, shoot a rifle. She didn't complain, didn't quit. And slowly, people started to notice. Ruth Tanner stopped by one afternoon with a basket of bread. She stayed for coffee and talked with Elena for an hour. Sam Ford came by the next week to look at the cattle. He nodded approvingly and told Rhett he was lucky to have a woman who wasn't afraid of work. Callahan sent word that he was in. So did 2 more ranchers. The drive was happening. But not everyone was happy about it. One evening, Rhett came back from town with a grim face. Elena was cooking supper when he walked in. What's wrong? She asked. Rhett tossed his hat on the table. Hale knows. Elena's stomach tightened. Knows what? About the drive. About the Lewiston plan. Somebody talked. What did he say? Didn't say anything. Sent one of his men instead. Guy named Dutch. Told me if we go through with this, Hale will make sure we regret it. Elena set down the spoon. How? Didn't say, but Hale doesn't make empty threats. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, We're not stopping. Rhett looked at her. Elena, we're not stopping. If we back down now, we lose everything, and so does everyone who believed in us. Rhett exhaled slowly. You know what you're asking? I know exactly what I'm asking. Rhett held her gaze. Then he nodded. All right, we keep going. Elena nodded back. Good. But that night, lying in the cabin, Elena couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside. She thought about Hale, about the threats, about the risk they were taking. She thought about the $2 silver Rhett had spent on her, and she made a promise to herself. She would not let those $2 be wasted. She would not let this ranch fall. She would not let Rhett lose everything. She would fight, no matter what it cost. The first snow came early that year, dusting the valley in thin white powder that melted by noon, but left everything damp and cold. Elena stood on the porch, wrapped in Rhett's old coat, watching the cattle move slow across the field. They looked worse every day, ribs showing, heads hanging low. If they didn't move soon, half of them wouldn't survive the drive. Rhett came around the side of the barn, carrying a saddle that needed new stitching. He saw her standing there and stopped. You all right? Elena nodded, but she didn't look at him. How many do you think we'll lose? Rhett set the saddle down on the porch rail. On the drive? Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Hard to say. Could be 10%, could be 30%. And if we don't go, then we lose all of them, along with the ranch. Elena finally looked at him. No margin for error. Never is. She turned back toward the field. When do we leave? 2 weeks. Maybe sooner if the weather holds. Elena nodded. 2 weeks. It felt like forever, and no time at all. That afternoon, Sam Ford rode up with his son, a lanky kid named Jacob, who couldn't have been more than 17. Sam climbed down from his horse, grunting with the effort, and shook Rhett's hand. Brought the boy, Sam said. Figured he could use the education. Jacob looked nervous but determined. Rhett nodded at him. You ever been on a cattle drive? No, sir. You scared? Jacob hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Means you're smart. Rhett clapped him on the shoulder. Stay close to your old man and you'll be fine. Sam grinned. Hear that, boy? Stay close. Elena stepped off the porch. Sam, do you have the final count? Sam pulled a folded paper from his coat. 43 head from my place. Ruth's bringing 26. Callahan's got 31. With yours, that puts us just over 150. Elena took the paper and studied it. That's lower than we projected. Best we could do. A few folks backed out last minute. Why? Sam glanced at Rhett, then back at Elena. Hale's been making noise, told people they'd regret crossing him. Rhett's jaw tightened. He say anything specific? Not to me, but Dutch came by Ruth's place 2 nights ago, told her she was making a mistake, said Hale had ways of making sure the drive didn't succeed. Elena's stomach twisted. Did he threaten her? Didn't have to. Ruth's got 2 kids and no husband. She's terrified, but she's still coming. Elena looked at Rhett. His face was hard, unreadable. She knew what he was thinking, knew he was weighing whether to call the whole thing off. We keep going, she said quietly. Rhett's eyes met hers. Elena, we keep going. If we stop now, Hale wins, and everyone who trusted us loses. Sam cleared his throat. She's right, Rhett. We're past the point of turning back. Rhett exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right, we leave in 12 days. Pass the word. Sam tipped his hat. Will do? He and Jacob mounted up and rode off, leaving Rhett and Elena standing in the cold. Elena wrapped the coat tighter around herself. You think Hale will try to stop us? I think he'll try to destroy us. How? Rhett looked toward the mountains, dark and distant. Don't know yet, but he's got men, got money, got time. We got none of that. We've got something he doesn't. What's that? Elena looked at him. Nothing left to lose? Rhett almost smiled. Almost. That's not always an advantage. It is when you're desperate. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Rhett said, You're not what I expected. Elena raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone who'd quit by now. Sorry to disappoint. You didn't. Elena felt something shift in her chest. She didn't know what to call it, didn't want to name it. She just nodded and walked back inside. The next week was a blur of preparation. They gathered supplies, repaired equipment, organized the cattle into manageable groups. Ruth Tanner came by with her 2 kids, a girl and a boy, both under 10. She looked exhausted but resolute. I'm bringing them, Ruth said, nodding toward the children. Can't leave them alone. Elena crouched down in front of the kids. You 2 ever been on an adventure? The girl, Emily, shook her head. The boy, Thomas, stared at Elena with wide eyes. Well, you're about to have one, Elena said gently. It's going to be hard and cold and probably a little scary, but we're all going together and we'll look out for each other, all right? Emily nodded slowly. Thomas grabbed his mother's hand. Ruth met Elena's eyes. Thank you. For what? For giving me a reason to fight. Elena stood. We're all fighting now. Callahan showed up the next day with a wagon full of supplies and 3 hired hands. He looked grim but ready. Hale's not happy, Callahan said, unloading sacks of grain. He pulled his business from my store, told everyone in town not to trade with me. Rhett frowned. I'm sorry, Callahan. Callahan waved him off. Don't be. I should have stood up to that bastard years ago. About time somebody did. Elena helped unload the wagon. What are people saying in town? That we're fools, that we're going to get killed in the mountains, that Hale's going to make sure we never come back, Callahan spat into the dirt. But a few folks are rooting for us. Quietly. That'll have to be enough, Elena said. 3 days before the drive, Rhett and Elena rode out to check the trail. The route north was rough, cutting through narrow passes and rocky terrain. The mountains loomed like a wall, snow already covering the peaks. Rhett pulled his horse to a stop at the base of the first pass. This is where it gets bad. Elena looked up at the steep slope, the jagged rocks, the narrow path barely wide enough for 2 horses. How long to get through? If the weather holds? 4 days? If it doesn't, we could be stuck up there for a week. And the cattle? They'll panic, they always do. We'll lose some, just a question of how many. Elena studied the pass, her mind already working through logistics. We'll need outriders on both sides, someone to keep the herd tight. If they scatter, we'll never get them back. Rhett looked at her. You've been reading about this. I've been reading everything I can find. Books don't prepare you for the real thing. Neither does standing around worrying. Rhett almost smiled. Fair point. They rode back in silence, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on both of them. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Her mind was a mess of numbers, routes, contingencies. She kept seeing the pass, kept imagining the cattle slipping, falling, dying, kept seeing Hale's men waiting in the shadows. She got up, wrapped a blanket around herself, and sat at the table. She lit a candle and opened her notebook, trying to calm her mind by writing. Plans? Lists. Anything to keep the fear at bay. The door creaked open. Rhett stepped inside, hat in hand. "Thought you'd be asleep," he said. "Thought you would be too." He closed the door and sat down across from her. "Can't stop thinking." "About what?" "About all the ways this could go wrong." Elena set down her pencil. "Me too." They sat in silence for a moment, the candle flickering between them. "You ever regret it?" Rhett asked quietly. "Regret what?" "Saying yes, coming here, marrying me." Elena looked at him. His face was tired, worn down by years of fighting a losing battle. But there was something else there too, something she hadn't noticed before. Hope. Fragile and barely holding on, but hope nonetheless. "No," she said. "I don't regret it." "Why not?" "Because for the first time in my life, I'm fighting for something that matters. I'm not just surviving, I'm building something. Even if it falls apart, at least I tried." Rhett stared at her. "You're braver than I am." Elena shook her head. "I'm just more desperate." Rhett reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of hard work. Elena's breath caught. She didn't pull away. "We're going to make it," Rhett said. "I don't know how, but we're going to make it." Elena squeezed his hand. "Yeah, we are." 2 days before the drive, everything went to hell. Rhett was in the barn when he heard the shouting. He dropped the bridle he was fixing and ran outside. Elena was already there, standing near the fence, staring at the field. Half the cattle were gone. Rhett's heart dropped into his stomach. He grabbed Elena's arm. "What happened?" "I don't know. I came out to check on them, and they were just gone." Rhett ran to the field, scanning the ground. Hoofprints, bootprints, tracks leading north toward the hills. He swore under his breath. "They were driven off," he said. "Somebody scattered them on purpose." Elena's face went pale. "Hale." "Has to be." Rhett ran back to the barn, saddled his horse, and rode hard toward the hills. Elena watched him go, her chest tight with panic. If they couldn't recover the cattle, the drive was finished. They'd have nothing to sell, nothing to save the ranch with. She stood there for a long moment, helpless and furious. Then she turned and ran to the cabin. She grabbed Rhett's rifle, checked the ammunition, and walked back outside. If Hale's men came back, they'd find her waiting. Rhett found the cattle 3 miles north, scattered across a rocky ravine. 2 of Hale's men were sitting on horseback nearby, watching. One of them, a thick-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, grinned when he saw Rhett. "Lost something, Mercer?" Rhett pulled his horse to a stop, breathing hard. "You scatter my herd?" The man shrugged. "Cattle wander. Ain't my fault. This is Hale's doing. Mr. Hale don't concern himself with small-time ranchers." Rhett's hand moved toward his rifle. The man's grin widened. "Careful now. Wouldn't want to do something stupid." Rhett's jaw clenched. He wanted to pull the rifle, wanted to shoot this bastard off his horse and drag him back to town. But he couldn't, not without proof. Not without starting a war he couldn't win. "Get off my land," Rhett said quietly. The man laughed. "Your land? That's funny. Way I hear it, this'll be Mr. Hale's land in about 3 months." The second man, younger and nervous-looking, spoke up. "Come on, Dutch. Let's go." Dutch gave Rhett one last look, still grinning, then turned his horse and rode off. The younger man followed. Rhett sat there for a long moment, shaking with rage. Then he climbed down and started the slow, brutal work of gathering the scattered cattle. It took him 6 hours to get them back. By the time he returned to the ranch, it was dark, and he was half frozen. Elena was waiting on the porch, rifle in hand. "You got them?" she asked. Rhett nodded, too tired to speak. He climbed down from his horse, staggered toward the cabin, and collapsed into a chair. Elena set the rifle aside and knelt beside him. "Are you hurt?" "No, just tired." "Who did it?" "Hale's man, Dutch." Elena's face hardened. We should report him. To who? The sheriff? He's on Hale's payroll. There's nothing we can do, Elena, except keep moving. Elena stood, fists clenched. This isn't right. Never said it was. She paced the room, furious and helpless. He's trying to break us before we even start. I know. So what do we do? Rhett looked up at her. We leave tomorrow. Early. Before he can try again. Elena stopped pacing. Tomorrow? We're not ready. We'll never be ready. But if we wait, he'll destroy us piece by piece. Elena stared at him. Then she nodded. All right, tomorrow. They worked through the night, packing supplies, checking equipment, organizing the herd. By dawn, they were ready. Sam Ford and his son arrived first, followed by Ruth and her kids. Callahan came last, bringing his hired hands and a wagon full of provisions. Everyone's here, Sam said, looking around. We really doing this? Rhett nodded. We're doing this. Ruth looked at the mountains, dark and forbidding in the morning light. I'm scared. So am I, Elena said. But we go anyway. They moved out just after sunrise, the herd trailing behind them in a slow, steady column. Elena rode near the front beside Rhett. The others spread out along the sides, keeping the cattle together. The kids rode in the wagon with the supplies, wide-eyed and silent. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. The cattle were calm. The weather held. The road was clear. Then they reached the pass. The trail narrowed, climbing steeply into the mountains. The cattle balked, unwilling to move forward. Rhett and Sam rode ahead, trying to lead them through. The herd pushed back, bellowing and shifting. Keep them tight, Rhett shouted. Elena rode along the side, pushing stragglers back into line. One of the steers broke away, scrambling up the rocks. Callahan went after it, cursing. The animal slipped, fell, and tumbled down the slope. It didn't get back up. Damn it, Callahan muttered. Keep moving, Rhett yelled. They pushed the herd forward, inch by brutal inch. The trail was treacherous, covered in loose rock and ice. Horses stumbled. Cattle slipped. The temperature dropped. By mid-afternoon, snow started falling. Ruth pulled her horse alongside Elena. This is insane. Elena wiped snow from her face. I know. We're going to lose more cattle. Probably. And if the weather gets worse, we keep going. Ruth stared at her. You're as stubborn as Rhett. Elena didn't answer. She just kept riding. By nightfall, they'd made it through the first pass. They set up camp in a narrow valley, huddled around fires, trying to stay warm. The cattle were restless, shifting and lowing in the dark. Elena sat near the fire, exhausted, staring into the flames. Rhett sat down beside her. You did good today. We lost 3 cattle. Could have been worse. Elena looked at him. How much worse can it get? Rhett didn't answer. They slept in shifts that night, taking turns watching the herd. Elena's shift was near dawn. She sat on a rock, rifle across her lap, watching the dark shapes of the cattle move in the shadows. The sky was starting to lighten, pale and cold. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. Elena stood, heart pounding. She raised the rifle. 4 riders appeared out of the darkness, moving toward the herd. Elena fired a warning shot into the air. The riders stopped. Who's there? She shouted. One of the riders laughed. Elena recognized the voice. Dutch. Morning, Mrs. Mercer, Dutch called. Nice day for a drive. Rhett appeared beside her, rifle in hand. What do you want? Just checking in, making sure you're all still alive. We're fine. Now get the hell out of here. Dutch's grin was visible even in the dim light. You know, it'd be a shame if something happened to your herd. A lot of dangerous country between here and Lewiston. Rhett raised his rifle. Leave. Now. Dutch studied him for a moment, then shrugged. Suit yourself. But don't say we didn't warn you. The riders turned and disappeared into the darkness. Elena lowered her rifle, hands shaking. They're going to sabotage us, she said. I know. What do we do? Rhett looked at her. We watch our backs, and we don't stop. The next day was worse. The trail climbed higher, the air thin and cold. 2 more cattle were lost, slipping off the narrow path and disappearing into the ravine below. Jacob Ford nearly went with them, his horse stumbling on loose rock. Sam grabbed the reins just in time. Easy, boy, Sam said, steadying the horse. You're all right. Jacob was pale, breathing hard. I almost... But you didn't. Now keep moving. By the third day, everyone was exhausted. Ruth's kids were crying. Callahan's men were grumbling about turning back. The weather was getting worse. Snow falling in thick sheets. Elena rode beside Rhett, her face numb with cold. How much farther? 2 more days? Maybe 3? We're not going to make it. Rhett looked at her sharply. Don't say that. I'm just being honest. Honesty doesn't keep us alive. Hope does. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to scream that hope wasn't enough, but she didn't. She just kept riding. That night they camped near a frozen stream. The fire barely kept the cold at bay. Everyone huddled together, too tired to talk. Elena sat beside Ruth, who was holding her kids close. I'm sorry, Ruth whispered. Elena frowned. For what? For bringing them into this. You gave them a chance. That's more than most people get. Ruth looked at her. You really believe that? Elena nodded. I have to. The 4th day brought disaster. They were halfway through the second pass when the storm hit. Wind howled through the mountains, driving snow so thick Elena couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The cattle panicked, scattering in all directions. Rhett shouted orders, but the wind tore his voice away. Elena rode into the chaos, trying to turn the herd back. A steer ran past her, wild-eyed and terrified. She chased it, but her horse slipped on ice and went down. Elena hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. She lay there, stunned, snow falling on her face. Then she heard hoofbeats. Rhett appeared out of the storm, dismounting fast. Elena! He pulled her to her feet. You hurt? She shook her head, gasping. I'm fine. Can you ride? Yes. He helped her back onto her horse. Stay close to me. They worked together, driving the scattered cattle back toward the trail. Slowly, painfully, the herd reformed. But when they finally counted, they'd lost 15 head, and Jacob Ford was missing. Sam's face went white. Where's my boy? He was on the left flank, Callahan said. Last I saw, he was chasing strays. Sam didn't wait. He rode back into the storm, shouting his son's name. Rhett and Elena followed. They searched for an hour, voices raw from yelling. Then they found him. Jacob was huddled behind a rock, his horse standing nearby. He was shivering violently, lips blue with cold. Jacob! Sam jumped down and grabbed his son. You all right? Jacob nodded, teeth chattering. Got turned around. Sam wrapped his coat around the boy. You're all right now, come on. They made it back to the group, battered and half frozen. The storm finally passed just before nightfall. They set up camp in silence, too exhausted to speak. Elena sat by the fire, staring at nothing. Rhett sat beside her. We lost a third of the herd, she said quietly. I know. It might not be enough. Even if we make it to Lewiston, we might not have enough cattle left to cover the debts. Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Then we find another way. Elena looked at him. There is no other way. There's always another way. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could still win. But sitting there, frozen and broken, she wasn't sure anymore. Rhett reached over and took her hand. We've come this far. We don't quit now. Elena closed her eyes. I'm tired, Rhett. I know, so am I. But we keep going. She opened her eyes and looked at him. His face was hard, lined with exhaustion and determination. But his eyes were steady, unbroken. All right, she whispered. We keep going. They reached Lewiston on the 6th day, battered but alive. The town was bigger than Timber Ridge, bustling with activity. The railhead was busy, trains coming and going, cattle pens full. Rhett rode straight to the stockyard and found the buyer, a sharp-eyed man named Morrison. They negotiated for an hour. Elena stood nearby, listening, calculating. When it was done, Morrison nodded. You got yourself a deal, Mercer. I'll take the whole lot. Rhett shook his hand. Appreciate it. They sold the cattle that afternoon. The money was good, better than they'd hoped. But when Elena tallied the numbers, her stomach sank. It's not enough, she said quietly. Rhett looked at the paper in her hand. How much short? $200. Rhett swore under his breath. They'd risked everything, lost cattle, nearly died in the mountains, and they were still $200 short. We'll figure it out, Rhett said. Elena didn't answer. She just stared at the numbers, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. That night in Lewiston, Elena sat in a cramped hotel room with the ledger spread across a table that wobbled every time she pressed her pencil too hard. The numbers didn't change no matter how many times she added them. $200 short. She'd crossed out options, scribbled calculations in the margins, tried every angle she could think of. Nothing worked. Rhett came in carrying 2 plates of food from the restaurant downstairs. He set one in front of her. "You need to eat." Elena didn't look up. "I need to find $200. "You need to eat first." She finally glanced at the plate. Steak, potatoes, bread. Real food. The first decent meal they'd had in weeks. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she pushed the plate aside. "I can't eat when we're still losing." Rhett sat down across from her. "We're not losing. We made it here. We sold the cattle. We're still standing. Standing $200 short of saving the ranch." Rhett cut into his steak, chewed, swallowed. "Then we find it." "Where?" "We've got nothing left to sell." "We've got the herd money. We can use part of it." Elena shook her head. "No, that money's already split between everyone who came with us. Sam, Ruth, Callahan, they risked everything too. We can't take their share." "They'd understand." "That's not the point. We made a deal. We keep it." Rhett set down his fork. "Then what do you suggest?" Elena stared at the ledger. "I don't know." They sat in silence. Downstairs, someone was playing piano badly. Voices drifted up through the floorboards, laughter and conversation. Normal people living normal lives. Elena felt like she was watching it all from underwater. "Eat," Rhett said quietly. "Please." Elena picked up the fork. The food tasted like nothing. The next morning, they met Morrison at his office near the stockyard. He was sorting through papers when they walked in, a cigar stuck in the corner of his mouth. "Mercer, Mrs. Mercer, what can I do for you?" Elena stepped forward. "We need to discuss the sale." Morrison looked up. "Something wrong with the payment?" "No, the payment's fair, but we need more." Morrison's eyebrows went up. "More? Lady, I already gave you top dollar for those cattle. You won't find a better price anywhere." "I'm not asking for a better price. I'm asking if you need anything else." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Like what?" Elena thought fast. "Horses, equipment, labor. We've got a good crew. People who know how to work." Morrison studied her. "You're desperate." "I'm practical." "What do you need the money for?" Rhett started to speak, but Elena cut him off. "Debt. We owe $800 to a man who wants our land. We're 200 short." Morrison whistled low. "That's a hell of a hole to climb out of." "We've climbed out of worse." Morrison took the cigar from his mouth, tapped ash into a tray. "I don't need horses, don't need labor, but I'll tell you what I do need." "What?" "Someone to run cattle from here to Helena. I got a buyer there who needs 100 head delivered in 3 weeks. My regular crew's tied up on another job. You interested?" Elena's heart jumped. "How much does it pay?" $300, split however you want." Elena glanced at Rhett. He looked exhausted, beaten down, but he nodded. "We'll do it," Elena said. Morrison grinned. "Didn't think you'd say no. You'll leave in 2 days. Cattle will be ready by then." They walked out of the office into cold morning sunlight. Rhett stopped on the boardwalk, hands on his hips. "We just agreed to another cattle drive." "Yes. We barely survived the last one." "I know." Rhett looked at her. "You're going to kill us both." Elena almost smiled. "Not if we're careful." "There's no careful with you." "You could have said no." Rhett shook his head, but there was something in his face that hadn't been there before. Pride, maybe, or respect. "I don't think I could have, even if I wanted to." They told the others that afternoon. Sam Ford rubbed his face with both hands. "Another drive? Are you serious?" "We're 200 short," Elena said. "This gets us the rest." Ruth looked at her kids, who were sitting on the hotel steps eating candy they'd bought with their share of the money. "I can't do it. Not with them. I'm sorry." "You don't have to," Rhett said. "This one's on us." Callahan crossed his arms. "You're going to need help. I'll come." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to, but you got us this far. Figure I owe you." Sam sighed. "Jacob and I are in, But if we die, I'm haunting you both. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Morrison's cattle were in better shape than the ones they'd driven from Timber Ridge, well-fed and calm. The route to Helena was shorter, less treacherous, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The night before they left, she couldn't sleep again. She sat by the window, watching the empty street below. Rhett came in from checking on the horses and found her there. You all right? Elena nodded. Just thinking. About? About how much we're risking. Again. Rhett sat down beside her. You regret it? No, but I'm scared. That makes two of us. Elena looked at him. In the dim light from the street, his face was shadowed, tired, but his eyes were steady, always steady. Why do you trust me? She asked quietly. Rhett frowned. What do you mean? You bought me for $2. You didn't know me, didn't know if I could do anything useful. But you keep following my plans, keep believing we'll make it. Why? Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because you don't give up. I've watched men with money, power, experience. They all give up when things get hard. But you don't. You just keep fighting, and that's the only thing that matters out here. Elena's throat tightened. What if I'm wrong? What if we lose everything? Then we lose it fighting. That's better than losing it scared. Elena looked back out the window. I don't feel brave. Nobody does. That's the secret. Brave people are just scared people who keep moving. Elena almost laughed. Where'd you hear that? Made it up just now. This time she did laugh, soft and surprised. Rhett smiled, a real smile, and for a moment the weight between them lifted. They left at dawn. The cattle were cooperative, the weather clear. They made good time the first 2 days, covering nearly 50 miles. Callahan rode point with Rhett. Sam and Jacob worked the flanks. Elena rode drag, keeping stragglers moving. On the third day, they saw riders in the distance. Rhett pulled his horse to a stop, squinting at the horizon. How many? Callahan shaded his eyes. 4, maybe 5. Could be drifters. Could be. But they both knew better. The riders were pacing them, staying just far enough back to avoid confrontation. Elena rode up beside Rhett. Hale's men. Probably. What do they want? To make sure we don't succeed. Elena's hand moved to the rifle strapped to her saddle. What do we do? Keep moving. Stay alert. Don't give them an opening. The riders followed them for 2 days. Never approaching, never leaving, just watching. It wore on everyone's nerves. Jacob kept looking over his shoulder. Callahan rode with his rifle across his lap. Rhett barely slept. On the 5th night, they camped near a river. The cattle were settled, grazing peacefully. Sam built a fire. Jacob heated coffee. Elena sat on a rock cleaning her rifle. Rhett walked the perimeter, checking the darkness. When he came back, his face was grim. They're out there. I saw their fire about a mile west. Callahan poured coffee. What's the play? We take shifts, 2 people awake at all times. If they come, we're ready. Sam nodded. I'll take first watch with Jacob. No, Rhett said. Jacob needs rest. I'll take it. Rhett, you haven't slept in 3 days. I'll sleep when we get to Helena. Elena stood. I'll take first watch with you. Rhett started to argue, but she cut him off. Don't. I'm not asking. He nodded. All right. They sat together near the fire as the others settled in. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead. The river murmured in the darkness. Elena checked her rifle for the 3rd time. You ever shot anyone? She asked quietly. Rhett glanced at her. No? You? No. You willing to? Elena thought about it. Thought about the ranch. About Rhett. About everyone who'd trusted them. If I have to, Rhett nodded. Good. Because they won't hesitate. They sat in silence for a while. Then Elena said, Tell me something. Like what? Something that's not about cattle or money or Hale. Something real. Rhett stared into the fire. My wife died 5 years ago. Fever. We'd only been married 2 years. Elena's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Me too. Rhett poked the fire with a stick. She was pregnant. Lost the baby too. Elena didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. After that, I just worked, Rhett continued. Didn't think about anything else. Figured if I worked hard enough, I could outrun it. But you can't outrun grief. It just sits there, waiting. Elena reached over and took his hand. Rhett looked at her, surprised. I lost my parents 3 years ago, Elena said. Cholera. They died 2 days apart. I had nothing left. No money, no family, just debts. That's why I came west. I thought if I could start over, maybe I could be someone new. And have you? Elena looked at him. I don't know yet. They sat like that, hands clasped, staring at the fire. For a moment, the world was quiet. No danger, no fear, just two people holding on. Then the shooting started. Muzzle flashes erupted from the darkness. Bullets tore through the camp. Rhett yanked Elena down behind the rock. Sam and Callahan scrambled for cover. Jacob screamed. Stay down, Rhett shouted. He raised his rifle and fired toward the flashes. Callahan did the same. The cattle stampeded, bellowing and crashing through the darkness. Elena grabbed her rifle and fired blindly into the night. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the sound of running hooves and distant shouts. Everyone all right? Rhett called. We're good, Sam said. Jacob's hit. Elena's stomach dropped. They ran to where Sam was crouched beside his son. Jacob was sitting up, clutching his arm. Blood seeped between his fingers. It's not bad, Jacob said, voice shaking. Just grazed me. Sam tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it around the wound. You're all right. You're all right. Rhett scanned the darkness. They're gone, but they'll be back. Callahan stood. We need to move. Now. The cattle scattered. Forget the cattle. We need to get out of here before they regroup. Rhett's jaw tightened. We lose the cattle. We lose everything. We stay here. We lose our lives. Elena stood. How many did we lose? Don't know. Half? More? Elena's mind raced. Half the herd gone meant half the payment gone. They'd be right back where they started. Worse, because they'd used up all their supplies, all their strength. We go after them, she said. Everyone stared at her. Elena, that's insane, Callahan said. We don't have a choice. We need that money. We need to be alive. Elena looked at Rhett. What do you think? Rhett stared into the darkness where the cattle had disappeared. She could see him calculating, weighing odds. Finally, he nodded. We go after them, but we move fast and we move careful. They broke camp in minutes, leaving the fire burning as a decoy. Rhett led them east, following the sound of the scattered herd. They rode hard through the darkness, rifles ready. An hour later, they found most of the cattle bunched in a shallow valley. Rhett and Callahan circled around, pushing them back together. It took until dawn, but they recovered nearly 80 head. Not all of them, but enough. As the sun rose, they counted losses. 20 cattle gone, one of the horses lamed, Jacob wounded, and they were still a day from Helena. We can make it, Elena said. Sam looked at her like she was crazy. You're serious? We've come this far. My son's bleeding. And he'll keep bleeding whether we quit or keep going. At least if we finish, it means something. Sam's face was hard. Then he looked at Jacob, who nodded. I'm all right, Pa. Let's finish it. Sam exhaled slowly. All right, we finish it. They pushed on. The cattle were spooked, hard to manage. Jacob rode one-handed, his wounded arm strapped to his chest. Callahan kept glancing back, watching for another attack. But the riders didn't return. They reached Helena late the next day, battered and exhausted. The buyer took one look at them and shook his head. You folks look like you've been through hell. Close enough, Rhett said. They delivered the cattle and got paid. The money was good, not as much as they'd hoped because of the losses, but enough. Elena counted it 3 times to be sure. We have it, she said quietly. We have enough. Rhett closed his eyes. Thank you. They paid Morrison his cut, paid Sam and Callahan their shares. What was left went into Elena's saddlebag. $830. More than enough to cover the debt and have a little left over. That night, they celebrated in a saloon. Jacob got drunk for the first time in his life, and Sam didn't stop him. Callahan bought a round for the house. Rhett sat in the corner, nursing a whiskey, watching Elena across the room. She was talking to the bartender, asking questions about land prices and market rates. Even now, even after everything, she was planning ahead. Rhett felt something twist in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Elena caught him staring. She walked over and sat down beside him. What? Nothing. Just thinking. About what? About how you saved us. Elena shook her head. We saved each other. Rhett looked at her. No, it was you. You kept us moving when I wanted to quit. You found the route when I didn't see one. You made me believe we could win. Elena's face softened. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. No. I needed someone to believe in me. You were the first person who did. Rhett reached over and took her hand. I don't regret it. Spending those $2, best decision I ever made. Elena's eyes shone in the lamplight. Me too. They rode back to Timber Ridge 3 days later. The valley looked different somehow, smaller, less threatening. As they approached the ranch, Elena felt her chest tighten. It looked the same as when they'd left. Sagging barn, patched fences. But now it felt like home. Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop. They climbed down in silence, staring at the land they'd nearly died to save. We need to go to the bank, Elena said. Pay Hale before he finds a way to take it anyway. Rhett nodded. Tomorrow. First thing. That night they slept in their own beds for the first time in weeks. Elena lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar creaks of the cabin. She felt different, stronger, like something inside her had been forged in fire and come out unbreakable. The next morning they rode into town. People stared as they passed. Word had spread about the drive to Lewiston, about the attack, about everything. Some faces showed respect, others showed fear. Hale's power was slipping. They tied their horses outside the bank and walked in. The clerk looked up, eyes widening. Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Mercer, what can I— We're here to see Hale, Rhett said. He's in a meeting. He'll want to see us. The clerk hesitated, then disappeared into the back. A moment later, Victor Hale emerged. He was a tall man, well-dressed, with silver hair and cold eyes. He looked at them like they were insects. Mercer, I heard you made quite the trip. We did. Lost a lot of cattle, from what I hear. Shame. We made enough. Hale's smile was thin. Did you now? Elena stepped forward and dropped the saddlebag on the desk. $800. That clears the debt. Hale didn't touch the bag. He just stared at it, then at Elena, then at Rhett. You're sure about this? Once you pay, there's no going back. No extensions. No second chances. We're sure, Rhett said. Hale opened the bag slowly. He counted the money, taking his time. When he was done, he looked up. This clears the primary loan, but there are additional fees, interest, late penalties, administrative costs. Elena's blood went cold. What? Hale pulled out a ledger. According to my records, you owe another $300. That's not what the contract says. The contract includes provisions for late payment, which you triggered 2 months ago. Elena grabbed the ledger. Show me. Hale pointed to a clause buried in small print. Elena read it twice. Her hands started shaking. This is fraud. This is business. Rhett stepped forward. You're lying. Hale's smile vanished. Careful, Mercer. Accusing a bank officer of fraud is a serious charge. So is stealing someone's land. I'm not stealing anything. I'm enforcing a legal contract. Elena stared at the ledger. The clause was real, legally binding. Hale had structured the loan to trap them. Even if they paid, he could invent fees and keep them in debt forever. There has to be a mistake, she said quietly. There's no mistake. You owe $300. Due immediately, or I foreclose. Rhett's hand moved toward his gun. Elena grabbed his arm. Don't. He's stealing from us. And if you shoot him, we lose everything. Hale watched them with cold amusement. Smart woman. You should listen to her, Mercer. Elena's mind raced. $300. They didn't have it. They'd spent everything getting here. There was nothing left. We need time, she said. You're out of time. 2 weeks. No. 1 week. Hale considered. Then he nodded. 1 week. But if you don't pay, I take the ranch. And this time, there's no negotiating. They walked out of the bank in stunned silence. Outside, Rhett punched the wall of the building, splitting his knuckles. That bastard! Elena leaned against the wall, feeling like the ground was collapsing under her. He planned this. From the beginning. He knew we'd find a way to pay, so he rigged the contract to make sure we couldn't. What do we do? I don't know. They stood there for a long time, watching the town move around them. People going about their lives like the world wasn't ending. Finally, Elena straightened. We fight. Rhett looked at her. How? I don't know yet, but we didn't survive 2 cattle drives just to lose everything to a piece of paper. Elena, he's got the law on his side. Then we change the law. That's not how it works. Elena turned to face him. Then we make it work. We expose him, show everyone what he's been doing, turn the whole valley against him. And how do we do that? We talk to the other ranchers, show them Hale's contracts, prove he's been trapping everyone the same way. If we can get enough people together, we can force the territorial authorities to investigate. Rhett stared at her. That's insane. So was driving cattle through the mountains, but we did it. Rhett shook his head. Then slowly, he started to smile. You're going to get us killed. Maybe, but at least we'll die fighting. They spent the next 3 days riding from ranch to ranch, talking to everyone they could find. Some people slammed doors in their faces. Others listened. Slowly, a picture emerged. Hale had been using the same tactics for years. Hidden fees, contract traps, legal manipulation. He'd been quietly stealing land across the valley, 1 ranch at a time. By the 4th day, they had a list. 12 ranchers willing to sign statements. 14 if they counted the ones too scared to go public but willing to testify if others did. Elena spread the statements across the kitchen table. This is enough. We take this to the territorial office in Helena, demand an investigation. Rhett looked at the papers. Hale will fight back. Let him. He's got money, lawyers, power. And we've got the truth. Rhett met her eyes. The truth doesn't always win. Then we make it win. They rode to Helena the next morning with the statements in a leather folder. The territorial office was a stone building near the Capitol. They walked in and asked to see the territorial auditor. The clerk looked them over. Do you have an appointment? No, but we have evidence of fraud. The clerk sighed. Everyone has evidence of fraud. You'll need to file a formal complaint and wait for Elena slapped the folder on the desk. Victor Hale of Timber Ridge has been illegally seizing property through fraudulent loan contracts. We have signed statements from 14 ranchers. We need someone to look at this now. The clerk blinked. I'll get the auditor. 10 minutes later, they were sitting across from a thin man with spectacles named Mr. Garrett. He read through the statements in silence, his frown deepening with each page. These are serious allegations, he said finally. They're all true, Elena said. Do you have copies of the contracts? Elena pulled out Rhett's loan documents. This is ours. The others have similar clauses. Garrett studied the contract. This is legal, technically. Unethical, but legal. He's using it to steal land. That's a matter of interpretation. Elena leaned forward. 14 families are about to lose everything because of this man. Are you going to help us or not? Garrett looked at her over his spectacles. I can open an investigation, but it'll take time, weeks, maybe months. We have 1 week before he forecloses. Then I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. Elena stood. Thank you for your time. Outside, Rhett kicked the steps. That was useless. Not useless. He's opening an investigation. That means something. It means nothing if we lose the ranch before he finishes. Elena stared at the street. Then we go to the newspaper. What? The Helena Record. If we can get them to publish the story, it puts public pressure on Hale, forces him to back off. Newspapers don't care about small-town feuds. They care about corruption, and that's what this is. They found the newspaper office 2 blocks away. The editor, a woman named Margaret Pierce, listened to their story with sharp interest. How many ranchers are involved? She asked. 14 who'll talk. Probably twice that who won't. Margaret made notes. And you have documentation? Elena handed her the folder. Margaret flipped through it, nodding. This is good. I'll run it. Front page, day after tomorrow. Elena felt hope flare in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Hale's going to come after you hard when this goes public. Let him, Margaret smiled. I like you. Most people are too scared to fight. We're too stubborn to quit. They rode back to Timber Ridge the next day, exhausted but hopeful. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside the ranch. Sam Ford, Ruth Tanner, Callahan, a dozen others. Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop. What's going on? Sam stepped forward. We heard what you're doing, going after Hale. We want to help. Elena climbed down. You don't have to do that. Yes, we do, Ruth said. He's been crushing us for years. You're the first ones to stand up to him. We're with you. Elena looked at the faces around her, tired, scared, but determined. If we do this, there's no going back. Hale will retaliate. He's already retaliating, Callahan said. We're tired of being afraid. Rhett nodded. All right, then we fight together. The newspaper came out 2 days later. The headline read, Valley Ranchers accuse prominent banker of fraud. The article laid out everything, the contracts, the hidden fees, the pattern of foreclosures. It named names, it published numbers. The reaction was immediate. By noon, people were lined up outside the bank, demanding answers. By evening, the territorial auditor's office announced a formal investigation. By the next morning, 3 of Hale's business partners had publicly distanced themselves from him. Elena stood on the porch, reading the article for the 3rd time. Rhett came up beside her. We did it, she said quietly. Not yet. Hale hasn't responded. He will. They didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, a writer came from town with a message. Hale wanted a meeting. Tomorrow. At the bank. It's a trap, Rhett said. Probably, but we have to go. Not alone, Elena nodded. Not alone. The next day they rode into town with Sam, Callahan, and Ruth. A crowd had gathered outside the bank. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to see how this played out. They walked inside. Hale was waiting, flanked by 2 men in suits, lawyers. Mercer, Mrs. Mercer, I see you brought friends. We're not here to be intimidated, Elena said. Hale smiled. I'm not here to intimidate. I'm here to make an offer. We're listening. I'll forgive the additional fees, clear your debt for the $800 you already paid, on one condition. What condition? You retract your statements to the newspaper, publicly apologize for the accusations, and sign a document stating everything in that article was false. Elena's stomach turned. You want us to lie. I want you to correct a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. You're a thief. Hale's smile vanished. Careful, Mrs. Mercer. Or what? You'll foreclose? Go ahead. The territorial auditor is investigating you. The newspaper's watching. Half the valley is ready to testify against you. You're finished. Hale stood slowly. You think you've won, but you haven't. I own this valley. I own the judge. I own the sheriff. You can fight all you want. In the end, I'll take everything you have. Rhett stepped forward. Then you better be ready for a hell of a fight. Hale's lawyers shifted nervously. One of them whispered something. Hale waved him off. Get out of my bank. Gladly. They walked out into the crowd. People pressed close, asking questions. Elena held up a hand. Hale offered to clear our debt if we lied about what he's done. We refused. The investigation continues. And we're not backing down. The crowd erupted in cheers. For the first time, Elena saw real hope in their faces. They weren't just fighting for their ranch anymore. They were fighting for everyone. That night, Elena and Rhett sat on the porch, watching the stars. The valley was quiet, peaceful. You think we'll win? Rhett asked. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. I think we already have. We're not scared anymore. Neither is anyone else. That's what matters. Rhett took her hand. I love you, Elena. Elena froze. She looked up at him. His face was open, vulnerable. You what? I love you. I should have said it sooner. Elena's eyes filled. I love you too. They kissed under the stars. 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them expected. Something stronger than fear, stronger than hardship. Something worth fighting for. The kiss lingered between them, soft and unexpected, until the cold night air reminded them where they were. Elena pulled back first, her cheeks flushed. Rhett looked at her like he was seeing something for the first time. "We should go inside," she said quietly. "Yeah." But neither of them moved. They just sat there, hands still clasped, the weight of everything they'd said settling over them like snow. Finally, Rhett stood and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, it's freezing out here." Inside, the cabin felt warmer than it had in weeks. Elena built up the fire while Rhett made coffee. They moved around each other with a new awareness, careful not to touch, but somehow always close. "What happens tomorrow?" Elena asked, sitting at the table. Rhett poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "We wait, see what the investigation turns up. And if it doesn't turn up anything in time, then we figure something else out, like we always do." Elena wrapped her hands around the mug. "I'm tired of fighting, Rhett." "I know, but I'm not going to stop." Rhett smiled. "I know that too." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Elena thought about everything that had happened since that night in the saloon. $2 silver. That's all it had taken to change both their lives. She wondered if Rhett ever regretted it, if he ever wished he'd kept that money and found another way. "What are you thinking about?" Rhett asked. "About how strange life is, how one decision can change everything." "You mean the $2? Elena nodded. "Do you ever wish you'd kept them?" Rhett set down his mug. "Never. Not once. Even when things were terrible? Even when we were starving and freezing and losing cattle? Especially then, because I wasn't alone anymore." Elena's throat tightened. "Neither was I." They went to bed that night in separate places as always. Elena in the cabin, Rhett in the barn, but something had shifted between them, something that made the distance feel wrong. The next morning brought trouble. Elena woke to the sound of shouting. She threw on clothes and ran outside. Rhett was already in the yard, facing 3 men on horseback. One of them was Dutch, Hale's hired gun. The other 2 looked just as mean. "What do you want?" Rhett demanded. Dutch grinned. "Just delivering a message from Mr. Hale." "We're done taking messages." "You'll want to hear this one. The bank's calling in all debts. Everyone who signed that newspaper statement? Their loans are due immediately. Full payment. No extensions." Elena felt her stomach drop. "He can't do that." "He just did. You got 3 days. After that, he forecloses on every property. Yours, Ford's, Tanner's, all of them." Rhett's hand moved toward his rifle. Dutch's smile widened. "Go ahead, Mercer. Give me a reason." "Rhett, don't," Elena said sharply. Rhett's jaw clenched, but he didn't draw. Dutch laughed. "Smart woman you got there. You should listen to her more often." He turned his horse. 3 days. Clock's ticking." They rode off, leaving dust hanging in the cold air. Elena walked over to Rhett. "He's trying to break us before the investigation finishes." "It's working." "No, it's not." Elena's mind was already racing. How many ranchers signed the statement? 14. How much do they owe collectively? Rhett shook his head. "I don't know. Thousands, probably." "We need exact numbers, today. Get everyone together. We're having a meeting." Elena, now Rhett. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded and headed for the barn to saddle his horse. By mid-afternoon, they'd gathered everyone in Sam Ford's barn. 14 ranchers, their families, all looking scared and angry. Elena stood at the front with a piece of paper and a pencil. "How much does everyone owe?" she asked. They went around the room, calling out numbers. Elena wrote them down, adding as she went. When they finished, she stared at the total. $18,000. The room went silent. Ruth Tanner laughed bitterly. "We're finished." "No, we're not," Elena said. "Where are we going to get $18,000 in 3 days?" "We're not, but we don't need to." Everyone stared at her. Callahan crossed his arms. "You better explain that." Elena set down the pencil. "Hale's trying to overwhelm us with numbers. Make it seem impossible so we give up. But the law is specific. He can't foreclose on all these properties simultaneously unless he follows proper legal procedure. That means individual hearings for each property, which takes time." "Time we don't have," Sam said. "We do if we force him to follow the law. I talked to a lawyer in Helena yesterday. If we file a formal challenge to the foreclosures, it delays everything until the territorial investigation concludes." "How do we file a challenge?" "We need to get to the county courthouse in Bozeman. File the paperwork before the 3-day deadline. Rhett frowned. Bozeman's a 2-day ride. Then we leave now. Elena, it's getting dark. I don't care. If we wait until morning, we lose half a day. We can't afford that. Ruth stood. I'll go with you. So will I, Sam said. Callahan nodded. Count me in. One by one, the ranchers volunteered. By the time they finished, 10 people had committed to making the ride. Elena felt something swell in her chest. They weren't beaten. Not yet. They left within the hour. 10 riders, pushing hard through the cold. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses. Elena's body ached, but she kept going. Behind her, she could hear Ruth talking quietly to her horse, Sam encouraging Jacob, Callahan swearing at the cold. They reached Bozeman at dawn on the second day, exhausted and half frozen. The courthouse was a brick building in the center of town. Elena walked in with the papers clutched in her hand, the others trailing behind her. The clerk looked up, startled. Can I help you? We need to file a formal challenge to multiple foreclosure proceedings. 14 properties, all in Timber Ridge. The clerk blinked. That's highly irregular. Is it legal? Well, yes, but then file it. It took 3 hours. The clerk had to verify every property, every signature, every claim. Elena stood at the counter the entire time, refusing to sit, refusing to rest. When it was finally done, the clerk stamped the papers and handed her a receipt. This delays all foreclosure proceedings pending investigation. You'll receive notice of the hearing date by mail. Elena took the receipt with shaking hands. Thank you. Outside, she showed the others. Sam let out a whoop. Ruth hugged her. Callahan clapped Rhett on the back. We did it, Elena said. For now, Rhett said. Hale's not going to take this well. Let him be angry. We bought ourselves time. They rode back to Timber Ridge slower, savoring the small victory. When they arrived 2 days later, word had already spread. People came out to meet them, cheering, asking questions. For the first time since this started, the valley felt united. But Elena knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, Rhett found Elena sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her. You all right? Just thinking about what comes next. We won. That's what comes next. Elena shook her head. We delayed him. That's not the same as winning. You saved 14 families from losing their homes. That's winning in my book. Elena looked at him. What if the investigation doesn't find anything? What if Hales covered his tracks too well? Then we fight again. And again. Until we win or we can't fight anymore. You make it sound simple. It is simple. We don't quit. That's all there is to it. Elena leaned against him. I'm glad I met you, Rhett Mercer. Even if I only paid $2 for you? She laughed softly. Especially because of that. They sat together as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. Elena thought about how far they'd come, how much they'd survived, and she wondered if they could survive what was coming. The answer came 3 days later. Elena was in the barn when she heard horses. A lot of them. She walked outside and saw at least 20 riders coming up the road. Rhett emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. That's the sheriff, he said quietly. The lead rider was a heavy man with a badge pinned to his vest. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of them. Rhett Mercer? That's me. I have a warrant for your arrest. Elena's blood went cold. On what charge? Fraud, conspiracy, defamation of character. Mr. Hale has filed a formal complaint. That's ridiculous, Elena said. We filed a legal challenge. That's not fraud. That's for a judge to decide. Mercer, you're coming with me. Rhett handed his rifle to Elena. Don't do anything stupid. Rhett, I'll be fine. Just stay here. No, I'm coming with you. The sheriff shook his head. The warrant's only for him. Then arrest me too. Whatever he's accused of, I'm equally responsible. The sheriff sighed. Lady, I don't want to arrest anyone, but Hale's got the law on his side, for now. Elena stepped closer. How much is he paying you? The sheriff's face darkened. Watch yourself. Answer the question. How much? The sheriff looked away. That was answer enough. Rhett climbed onto one of the spare horses. Elena, let it go. No, please, just let it go. Elena watched them ride away, fury and helplessness warring in her chest. The moment they disappeared from view, she ran for the cabin. She grabbed money, papers, everything she'd need. Then she saddled her horse and rode for Bozeman. She arrived 12 hours later, went straight to the lawyer's office she'd visited before. The man, Mr. Howard, looked surprised to see her. Mrs. Mercer, what are you doing here? They arrested Rhett on charges filed by Victor Hale. Howard's face went grim. What charges? Fraud, conspiracy, defamation. Those are serious accusations. They're also false. Hale's retaliating because we challenged him. Howard sat down heavily. I can represent him, but it'll cost. How much? $200. Up front. Elena counted out the money. It was almost everything they had left, but she didn't hesitate. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning, Judge Crawford presiding. Is he fair? Howard hesitated. He's thorough, but he's also old friends with several prominent businessmen in the territory, including Hale's associates. Elena's stomach sank. So we're walking into a rigged trial. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She left the office and went to the jail. The deputy at the front desk tried to stop her, but she pushed past him. Rhett was in a cell at the back, sitting on a narrow cot. Elena, what are you doing here? What do you think I'm doing? I'm getting you out. There's no bail. Judge ordered me held until the hearing. Elena gripped the bars. This is wrong. I know. Hale's trying to destroy us. I know that too. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold metal. I'm scared, Rhett. Me too. But we've been scared before. We survived. What if we don't this time? Rhett reached through the bars and took her hand. Then we go down fighting, together. Elena squeezed his hand hard, then left before the deputy could throw her out. The hearing was held in a cramped courtroom that smelled of old wood and tobacco. Judge Crawford was a white-haired man with a stern face. Victor Hale sat at the front with two lawyers. Elena sat in the back with Mr. Howard, who looked nervous. The charges were read. Fraud, conspiracy to defame hoax, malicious interference with business operations. Hale's lawyers presented documents, testimonies, financial records. They painted Rhett as a desperate man who'd fabricated lies to escape his debts. When it was Howard's turn, he stood and called Elena to testify. She walked to the stand, heart pounding. The bailiff swore her in. Howard approached. Mrs. Mercer, how long have you been married to Rhett Mercer? 6 months. And in that time, have you ever known him to act dishonestly? Never. Have you ever known him to fabricate evidence or make false accusations? No. Howard pulled out the newspaper article. You're aware of this article? Yes, I helped write it. And is everything in this article true to the best of your knowledge? Yes. One of Hale's lawyers stood. Objection. The witness has no expertise in financial or legal matters. Judge Crawford nodded. Sustained. Howard tried a different approach. Mrs. Mercer, can you describe the loan contract your husband signed with Mr. Hale's bank? Elena detailed the hidden fees, the impossible terms, the trap designed to ensure they could never pay off the debt. She spoke clearly, precisely, laying out the numbers. Hale's lawyer stood again. Objection. This is conjecture. It's not conjecture, Elena said sharply. It's mathematics. The judge frowned. Mrs. Mercer, please confine yourself to answering the questions asked. I am answering. You just don't want to hear the truth. The courtroom went silent. Judge Crawford's face darkened. You will show respect in this court, or I will hold you in contempt. Howard touched Elena's arm. Mrs. Mercer. No. Elena stood. I'm done being respectful to people who don't deserve it. Victor Hale has been stealing land from families across this valley for years. He traps them in debt they can't escape. And when someone finally stands up to him, he uses the law to crush them. That's not justice. That's tyranny. Hale's lawyer slammed his hand on the table. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Sit down, Mrs. Mercer, the judge said coldly. I will not. Not until you hear what I have to say. Bailiff, remove her. Two men moved toward Elena. Howard stepped between them. Your Honor, please. Shh, she's emotional. Give her a moment. Judge Crawford stared at Elena. Then he waved the bailiff back. You have 1 minute. Make it count. Elena looked around the courtroom. At Hale, smug and confident. At Rhett, watching her with something like awe. At the judge, who probably already knew what verdict he'd give. I don't have documents proving Hale's corruption, she said. Not ones that would satisfy a court. But I have something better. I have 14 families who are willing to stand up and say they've been wronged. I have a valley full of people who are tired of being afraid. And I have the truth. That has to count for something. It has to. The courtroom was silent. Then Judge Crawford spoke. Mrs. Mercer, passion does not equal evidence. Without proof of wrongdoing, this court cannot rule in your favor. Elena's heart sank. So that's it? Hale wins because he's better at hiding his crimes? This court is not here to adjudicate accusations without foundation. Mr. Mercer is charged with specific crimes. The prosecution has presented evidence. The defense has not sufficiently refuted it. I have no choice but to find the defendant guilty on all charges. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Rhett closed his eyes. Hale smiled. Sentencing will be determined in 30 days. Until then, the defendant will remain in custody. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Elena felt the world tilt. Howard was saying something, but she couldn't hear him. She pushed through the crowd to Rhett as they led him away. I'm sorry, she said. I tried. Rhett grabbed her hand through the bars. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. It was enough. Don't you see? You stood up to all of them. You didn't back down. That matters, Elena. It doesn't matter if I lose you. Rhett pulled her close as the bars allowed. You're not going to lose me. I promise. But Elena didn't see how he could keep that promise. She left the courthouse in a daze. Outside, she found Sam Ford waiting with Ruth and Callahan. We heard, Sam said quietly. Elena couldn't speak. She just shook her head. Ruth stepped forward. What do we do now? I don't know. There has to be something. Elena looked at them. These people who'd trusted her, who'd followed her into impossible situations, and she had nothing left to give them. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She walked away before they could respond. She needed to think, needed to find a way out of this. But her mind was blank, exhausted. She spent that night in a boarding house, lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in this town, Rhett was in a cell. Somewhere in Timber Ridge, families were waiting to lose everything. And she had no idea how to save any of them. The next morning, she walked the streets aimlessly. She found herself outside the territorial auditor's office. On impulse, she walked inside. Mr. Garrett looked up from his desk. Mrs. Mercer, I heard about the trial. I'm sorry. Is the investigation complete? Not yet. These things take time. We don't have time. Rhett's been convicted. Hale's going to foreclose on everyone. We need something now. Garrett hesitated. I shouldn't tell you this, but we've found irregularities. Elena's heart jumped. What kind of irregularities? Property transfers that don't match the recorded sales. Money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. It's not proof yet, but it's suspicious. How long until you have proof? Weeks, maybe longer. Elena felt desperation clawing at her. What if I could get you more evidence, something concrete? Like what? Hale's bank records, his personal ledgers, the originals, not copies. Garrett leaned back. If you could do that, it would speed things up considerably. But those records are kept in his bank, under lock and key. What if I got them anyway? Garrett's eyes widened. Mrs. Mercer, I cannot advise you to commit a crime. I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking if it would help. Garrett looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, it would help. Elena walked out of the office with a plan forming in her mind. It was dangerous, probably illegal, almost certainly impossible. She was going to rob Victor Hale's bank. She rode back to Timber Ridge that night and gathered Sam, Ruth, and Callahan at the ranch. I need your help, she said. With what? Sam asked. Elena took a breath. I'm going to break into Hale's bank, steal his records, and give them to the territorial auditor. They stared at her. Callahan laughed. You're serious. Completely. Elena, that's insane, Ruth said. So was everything else we've done. But we did it anyway. Sam crossed his arms. Even if we could get in, we'd be caught. Hale's got guards, locks, safes. I know, that's why I need help. Callahan shook his head. This is too much. We could all end up in jail. We're losing anyway. At least this way we're fighting. They looked at each other. Then Sam sighed. All right, I'm in. Me too, Ruth said. Callahan swore under his breath. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But I'm in. Elena felt relief wash over her. Thank you. They spent the next 2 days planning. The bank had one guard at night. The safe was in Hale's office on the second floor. They'd need to get in, crack the safe, grab the records, and get out without being seen. It was impossible, but they were going to try anyway. On the third night, they put the plan into motion. Callahan created a distraction, a fire in a barrel behind the general store. The guard left his post to investigate. Sam and Elena slipped through the back door of the bank. Inside, it was dark and silent. They moved quickly, climbing the stairs to Hale's office. The door was locked. Sam pulled out tools and worked at the mechanism. It took 5 minutes that felt like hours. The lock clicked. They stepped inside. The safe was against the far wall, heavy and imposing. Elena knelt in front of it, hand shaking. Can you open it? Sam whispered. I don't know. She'd read about safecracking in a book she'd found in Helena. It had seemed straightforward on paper, but now, facing the real thing, she wasn't sure. She pressed her ear to the safe and started turning the dial slowly, listening for clicks. 1, 2, 3. The mechanism was complex, but she focused, blocking out everything else. Then she heard voices. Footsteps on the stairs. Someone's coming, Sam hissed. Elena's hands froze. I'm almost there. We need to go. Just one more. The safe clicked. The door swung open. Inside were stacks of ledgers, papers, documents. Elena grabbed as many as she could carry. The door to the office burst open. The guard stood there, gun drawn. Don't move. Sam stepped in front of Elena. Run. Sam, go. Elena ran. She heard shouting behind her, a scuffle. She flew down the stairs, clutching the ledgers, and burst out the back door. Ruth was waiting with horses. Where's Sam? He stayed behind. Come on. They rode hard into the night. Elena's mind was screaming at her to go back, to help Sam, but she couldn't, not with the evidence in her hands. They made it to the ranch as dawn broke. Callahan was waiting. Where's Sam? They caught him, Ruth said, voice shaking. Callahan swore. Elena set the ledgers on the table, breathing hard. Was it worth it? Ruth asked. Sam's in jail. For what? Some papers? Elena opened the first ledger. Inside were columns of numbers, property transfers, loans marked as paid that were later reopened, evidence of everything they'd accused Hale of, and more. Yes, Elena said. It was worth it. She rode to Bozeman's that morning and delivered the ledgers to Mr. Garrett. He spread them across his desk, eyes widening as he read. Where did you get these? Does it matter? Mrs. Mercer, does it matter? Garrett looked at her. Then he shook his head. No, it doesn't. This is exactly what we needed. Thank you. How long until you can act? Days, maybe a week. Make it days, please. Garrett nodded. I'll do my best. Elena left his office and went straight to the jail. She visited Rhett first, told him everything. Then she asked to see Sam. Sam looked tired but unbroken. Did you get them, the ledgers? Yes. Good. Then it was worth it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Sam. Don't be. We're winning, Elena. Can't you see that? We're finally winning. Elena wanted to believe him, but sitting in that jail, looking at two men who'd risked everything because she'd asked them to, she wasn't sure winning felt the way she'd thought it would. She left the jail and walked the streets of Bozeman until her feet hurt. Then she sat on a bench and cried for the first time since this all started. She cried for Rhett, for Sam, for everyone who'd suffered because of her plans. When the tears finally stopped, she stood up. She walked to the courthouse, to the judge's chambers. She demanded to see Judge Crawford. The clerk tried to stop her. You can't just... Tell him Elena Mercer is here. Tell him I have new evidence. and tell him if he doesn't see me right now, I'm going to stand outside this courthouse and tell everyone who passes exactly what kind of judge he is." 5 minutes later, she was sitting across from Judge Crawford. "Mrs. Mercer, this is highly irregular. So is convicting an innocent man because a corrupt banker paid you to?" Crawford's face went red. "I could have you arrested for that accusation." "You could, but you won't, because it's true and we both know it." Crawford stared at her. Then quietly he said, "What do you want?" "I want you to review new evidence. Evidence that proves everything we said about Victor Hale." "What evidence?" Elena pulled out copies of the ledgers. "Bank records, property transfers, proof of fraud going back 10 years. Crawford took the papers. He read through them slowly. His face went pale. "Where did you get these?" "That doesn't matter. Mrs. Mercer, if these were obtained illegally, then prosecute me. But first, free my husband." Crawford set down the papers. "I can't just overturn a verdict." "Yes, you can. You're a judge. You have that power." "It would be unprecedented. So is this much evidence of corruption? Make a choice, Judge. Justice or cowardice?" Crawford looked at her for a long time. Then he stood. "I'll review these tonight. If they're authentic, I'll order a new hearing, but I make no promises." Elena stood. "That's all I ask." She left his chambers with her heart pounding. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in days, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Elena spent that night in the boarding house, staring at the ceiling and waiting for dawn. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Rhett behind bars, Sam sitting in that cell, the judge's cold face when he'd pronounced the guilty verdict. She'd pushed the papers across Crawford's desk and walked out, but she had no idea if it would make a difference. Men like Crawford had spent lifetimes protecting men like Hale. Why would he change now? At first light, she gave up trying to rest. She dressed, splashed cold water on her face, and walked to the courthouse. It was too early for the building to be open, so she sat on the steps and waited. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky pink and gold. People began moving through the streets, merchants opening shops, women carrying baskets, a boy leading a horse to the blacksmith. Normal life continuing while hers hung in the balance. The courthouse doors opened at 8. Elena was the first one inside. She walked straight to Crawford's chambers. The clerk tried to stop her again, but Crawford's voice called from inside. "Let her in." Elena stepped into the office. Crawford sat at his desk, the ledger spread in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn. "Mrs. Mercer, sit down." Elena remained standing. "Have you made a decision?" Crawford removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "I've spent the entire night reviewing these documents, cross-referencing them with property records, loan agreements, tax filings. And you were right. Victor Hale has been systematically defrauding landowners across this territory for at least a decade, possibly longer." Elena felt something loosen in her chest. "So you'll overturn the verdict?" "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is. Rhett was convicted based on false charges filed by a criminal. You free him. You arrest Hale. It's simple." Crawford stood slowly. "What you're asking me to do is admit I made a mistake. Publicly. That I allowed myself to be influenced by a man I've known for 20 years. Do you understand what that means for my reputation?" Elena stepped closer to the desk. "Do you understand what it means for mine if I don't fight? For my husband's? For every family Hale has destroyed? I don't care about your reputation, Judge. I care about justice." Crawford's face reddened. "You have no right to speak to me that way." "I have every right. You're a public servant. You work for us, not for men like Hale." They stared at each other across the desk. The clock on the wall ticked. Finally, Crawford sat down heavily. "I'll order a new hearing, today, and I'll issue a warrant for Hale's arrest." Elena's knees almost gave out. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Hale has resources, connections. This won't be easy." "Nothing about this has been easy?" Crawford almost smiled. "No, I suppose it hasn't." Elena left his chambers and went straight to the jail. She found Rhett pacing his cell like a caged animal. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "What happened?" "Crawford's ordering a new hearing, today, and he's issuing a warrant for Hale." Rhett gripped the bars. Are you serious? Completely. How did you do it? Elena smiled tiredly. I broke into Hale's bank and stole his records. Rhett stared at her. You what? You heard me. Elena, don't. It worked. That's all that matters. Rhett shook his head, but he was smiling now. You're going to be the death of me. Not today, I'm not. The hearing was held that afternoon. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread fast. Elena sat in the front row with Ruth and Callahan. Sam was brought up from the cells to sit with them. His wrists were shackled, but he was grinning. We did it, he whispered to Elena. Not yet, but almost. Judge Crawford entered and everyone stood. He took his seat and banged the gavel. This court is now in session. We're here to review new evidence in the case of the Territory versus Rhett Mercer. Hale's lawyers stood immediately. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defendant was convicted 3 days ago. There's no basis for Sit down, Crawford said flatly. I've reviewed documentation that calls into question not only this conviction, but the credibility of the complainant. One of the lawyers paled. Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance. Request denied. Mr. Hale, where are you? Silence. Elena looked around. Hale wasn't in the courtroom. Crawford's face darkened. Bailiff, is Mr. Hale in the building? No, Your Honor. We sent deputies to his home and his bank. He's nowhere to be found. Crawford slammed the gavel. Issue a warrant for his arrest. Charge him with fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted. Hale's lawyers were on their feet, shouting objections. Crawford shouted back, banging the gavel repeatedly until order was restored. In light of the new evidence and the complainant's failure to appear, I'm overturning the verdict against Rhett Mercer. All charges dismissed. Mr. Mercer, you're free to go. Elena couldn't breathe. Rhett was released from the holding area and she ran to him. He caught her, held her tight, and for a moment the chaos of the courtroom faded away. It's over, she whispered. Not yet, Rhett said. Hale's still out there. Crawford wasn't finished. He ordered Sam Ford released immediately, dismissed all pending foreclosures across Timber Ridge, and launched a full territorial investigation into Hale's business practices. The courtroom was in chaos, people shouting, crying, celebrating. Elena felt Ruth grab her hand. Sam was hugging his son. Callahan was laughing and swearing at the same time. They walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight. A crowd had gathered outside, ranchers and families from across the valley. When they saw Elena and Rhett, they erupted in cheers. You did it! Someone shouted. You beat him! Elena raised her hands, trying to quiet them. We're not done yet. Hale's still free. And until he's caught, none of us are safe. The crowd sobered. A man Elena recognized from the feed store stepped forward. What do you need? We need to find him, before he runs. We'll help. Every man here will help. Within an hour, they'd organized search parties. 20 men on horseback, fanning out across the territory. They checked Hale's home, his bank, his office at the railway depot. Nothing. The man had vanished. Elena and Rhett rode back to Timber Ridge as the sun was setting. They were exhausted, but Elena's mind wouldn't stop working. Where would Hale go? He had money, connections. He could disappear if he wanted to. He'll run north, Rhett said, reading her thoughts. Try to make it to Canada. How long does he have? 2 days head start, maybe 3. If he's smart, he's already across the border. Elena's jaw tightened. Then we ride north. Elena, we've been riding for days. We need rest. I'll rest when he's caught. Rhett looked at her. You really won't let this go, will you? Would you? He smiled. No, I wouldn't. They gathered a group, Sam, Callahan, Ruth, and 3 other ranchers, and left before dawn. They pushed hard, following the northern road toward the Canadian border. On the second day, they got word from a station master that a man matching Hale's description had passed through, heading for a trading post near the border. They reached the post just after noon. It was a rough place, a handful of buildings clustered around a muddy road. Elena dismounted and walked into the general store. The owner, a weathered man with suspicious eyes, looked up. Help you? We're looking for a man, tall, silver hair, well-dressed. Come through here recently? The owner hesitated. Elena pulled out a $20 bill and set it on the counter. The man's eyes flicked to the money. Might have seen someone like that. Yesterday evening, bought supplies. Headed west toward the mining camps. Elena took back the money. Thank you. They rode west. The terrain grew rougher, the road narrowing to a trail that wound through dense forest. It was getting dark when they saw smoke from a campfire ahead. Rhett held up a hand and they stopped. He dismounted silently, motioning for the others to do the same. They crept forward on foot. Through the trees, Elena could see a figure sitting by the fire. Silver hair, expensive coat, Hale. Rhett pulled his rifle. Victor Hale, you're under arrest. Hale spun, reaching for a gun at his side. Callahan fired a warning shot into the air. Hale froze. Don't, Rhett said. Put it down. Hale's face twisted with rage. You! I should have known you'd come crawling after me. Put the gun down. Hale glanced around, calculating odds. 7 of them. 1 of him. Slowly, he set the gun on the ground. Sam moved forward and kicked it away. Hale straightened, trying to maintain dignity even as his world collapsed. You think you've won, he said to Elena. You haven't. I have lawyers, friends in high places. I'll be out in a month. Elena stepped closer. Maybe. Or maybe those friends will abandon you the moment they realize you're a liability. Maybe your lawyers will find ways to distance themselves. Maybe you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, watching everything you built crumble. Hale's face paled. You can't prove anything. We already did. Your own ledgers prove it. Every fraudulent transfer, every forged document, every family you destroyed, it's all there. For the first time, Hale looked uncertain, scared. Elena felt no satisfaction in it, just exhaustion. They bound his hands and put him on a horse. The ride back to Bozeman took 2 days. Hale was silent the entire time, staring at the ground. When they delivered him to the territorial marshal, the man shook Rhett's hand. Good work. The governor's been wanting to bring Hale down for years. Why didn't he? Elena asked. The marshal shrugged. Politics, money, fear, take your pick. And now? Now we have evidence and witnesses. He's finished. They watched as Hale was led into the building in chains. Elena waited to feel something, triumph, relief, joy, but all she felt was tired. Come on, Rhett said gently. Let's go home. They rode back to Timber Ridge slowly, letting the horses set the pace. The valley looked different in the spring light, greener, more alive. When they reached the ranch, Elena climbed down and just stood there, staring at the cabin, the barn, the fields. It's really over, she said quietly. Rhett came up beside her. Yeah, it is. Elena turned to him. What do we do now? Now we live. We fix the fences, tend the cattle, plant crops. We do all the normal things we haven't had time to do because we were too busy fighting. Elena smiled. That sounds boring. Good. I could use some boring. That night they sat on the porch as the sun set. Rhett was drinking coffee. Elena was sketching plans for expanding the barn. It felt strange, peaceful, like they'd stepped into someone else's life. Can I ask you something? Rhett said. Always. When you were standing on that stage in the saloon, being sold like livestock, what were you thinking? Elena set down her pencil. I was thinking that I'd made a terrible mistake, that I should have stayed in Boston and starved there instead of coming west to be humiliated. I was thinking that my life was over. And now? Elena looked at him. Now I'm thinking my life finally started. Rhett reached over and took her hand. They sat like that, watching the last light fade from the sky. The trial took place 3 months later in Helena. The territorial prosecutor brought charges of fraud, conspiracy, extortion, and dozens of related crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. Hale's lawyers tried every trick they knew, but nothing worked. The ledgers Elena had stolen laid out everything in black and white. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Judge Crawford, who'd been assigned to preside over the trial, sentenced Hale to 15 years in the territorial prison. As the guards led him away, Hale looked directly at Elena. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, Elena said. It is. She never saw him again. The aftermath took longer to sort out. The bank was seized by territorial authorities. An independent auditor spent months untangling Hale's finances. One by one, the fraudulent foreclosures were reversed. Families got their land back. Debts were forgiven. The valley began to heal. But healing took time. Ruth Tanner struggled for months after losing her small savings in the chaos. Sam Ford's leg never quite recovered from an old injury that got worse during the mountain drive. Callahan's store took years to rebuild the customer base Hale had destroyed. These were the scars that didn't show in the courtroom victories, the quiet costs of fighting back. Elena and Rhett threw themselves into the work of rebuilding the ranch. They fixed the barn, repaired fences, bought new cattle with money from a territorial relief fund established for Hale's victims. It was hard work, but it was honest work. And for the first time in their lives, it felt like they were building something that would last. 6 months after the trial, on a cold December morning, Rhett found Elena in the barn. She was sitting on a hay bale, holding a letter. "What's that?" he asked. Elena looked up, her eyes shining. "It's from the territorial governor. He's coming to Timber Ridge next month. Wants to present us with a commendation for exposing corruption." Rhett sat down beside her. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I don't care about commendations. I just want to live quietly and never have to fight anyone ever again." Rhett laughed. "Good luck with that. People are already talking about you running for territorial delegate." "Absolutely not." "Why not? You're good at it. Fighting for people, I mean." Elena leaned against him. "I'm tired of fighting. I want to build things instead. A home, a family, a life that's ours, not defined by someone else's cruelty." Rhett wrapped his arm around her. "That sounds perfect." That night, as they were getting ready for bed, Elena stood at the window looking out at the valley. Rhett came up behind her. "What are you thinking about?" "About those $2 silver. About how something so small changed everything." "You changed everything. The money was just the excuse." Elena turned to face him. "No, we changed everything, together." Rhett kissed her softly. "Yeah, we did." The following spring they held a proper wedding. The first one had been a transaction, a legal formality. This one was a choice. They stood in front of the whole valley, everyone who'd fought alongside them, everyone who'd believed in them, and made vows they actually meant. Ruth stood beside Elena. Sam stood beside Rhett. Jacob Ford played fiddle while his father cried unashamedly. Even Callahan got emotional, though he tried to hide it. When the ceremony ended, they held a celebration that lasted until dawn. There was food, music, dancing. For one night, the valley forgot about hardship and struggle and just celebrated. Elena danced with Rhett under the stars, surrounded by people who'd become family. "Happy?" Rhett asked, deliriously. "Even though you only cost me $2? Elena laughed. "Best investment you ever made." No arguments there. They had their first child the following winter, a daughter. They named her Hope because that's what they'd fought for, what they'd held on to when everything else was falling apart. Elena held the baby while standing on the porch, looking out at the land they'd saved. Rhett stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "You think she'll grow up understanding what this place means?" Elena asked. "I think she'll grow up knowing that her parents didn't quit when things got hard, that they fought for something worth keeping. That's enough." Elena nodded. "Yeah, it is." Over the years, the ranch grew. They added more land, more cattle, built a bigger house. The valley prospered as other ranchers learned they didn't have to accept exploitation as the cost of survival. A new bank opened, run by fair men who saw lending as a service, not a weapon. The railway depot changed hands. Slowly, the shadow Hale had cast over everything lifted. But Elena never forgot what it felt like to be desperate, to stand on a stage and feel worthless, to watch people mock you and wonder if they were right. So when other desperate people showed up at their door, and they did, regularly, she never turned them away. She hired drifters, gave work to widows, took in families with nowhere else to go. Some people called her soft, but Elena knew better. She wasn't soft, she was human, and she remembered what it meant when someone gave you a chance. 10 years after that night in the saloon, Timber Ridge held a celebration marking the anniversary of Hale's conviction. They erected a small monument in the town square with the names of everyone who'd fought against him. Elena and Rhett's names were at the top. Elena stood looking at it, uncomfortable with the attention. Rhett stood beside her, equally uncomfortable. "This feels wrong," she said. "Why?" "Because we didn't do this alone. Everyone fought. Everyone risked something. That's why all the names are on there." "Mine shouldn't be bigger than the others," Rhett smiled. "Take it up with the town council, but good luck. They worship you." Elena made a face. "I don't want worship. I just wanted a fair chance. You gave that to everyone here. They're grateful." Elena looked around at the faces gathered in the square. Sam Ford, older now, but still strong. Ruth Tanner with her kids, both nearly grown. Callahan with his rebuilt store. Dozens of families, hundreds of people, all of them free from fear because they'd chosen to fight together. "It was worth it," Elena said quietly. "All of it. The fear, the risk, the exhaustion. It was worth it." "Yeah," Rhett agreed. "It was." That night, they sat on their porch, much nicer now than the sagging wreck it had been, watching their daughter play in the yard. She was chasing chickens, laughing when they scattered. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't bought me that night?" Elena asked. Rhett thought about it. "I'd probably be dead, or living somewhere else, broken and bitter. And I'd be—" Elena trailed off. She didn't like to think about it. "No, we're good. But we're here instead. And we're happy." Elena reached over and took his hand. "We are." "You know what the strange part is?" Rhett said. "I spent all those years after my first wife died thinking I'd never be happy again. That happiness was something that happened to other people. And then you showed up, and everything changed." "I didn't change anything. We just chose not to give up." "No. You changed everything. You showed me that strength isn't about how much you can carry alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to stand together. I'd forgotten that. You reminded me." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You saved me first. When nobody else wanted me, you did. That meant something." Rhett pulled her close. "We saved each other. That's how it works." They sat together as the sun set, watching their daughter play, listening to the sounds of the valley settling in for the night. It wasn't a perfect life. They still struggled with money sometimes. The ranch work was still hard. They still argued, still had bad days, still faced problems that felt overwhelming. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Years passed. Hope grew up strong and stubborn, with her mother's mind for numbers and her father's steady determination. She learned early that her parents had fought for everything they had. And she learned that fighting didn't mean violence or cruelty. It meant refusing to accept that someone else got to decide your worth. When she was 16, Hope asked her mother about the 2 silver dollars. They were kept in a small wooden box on the mantel, polished and preserved. "Why do you keep them?" Hope asked. Elena picked up the box, opened it, looked at the coins. "Because they remind me of something important." "What?" "That value isn't about price. Your father gave everything he had for me. Not because I was worth $2, but because he saw something in me that nobody else did. He saw that I was worth fighting for. And I saw the same in him. But they're just coins." Elena smiled. "No, they're proof that the smallest act of faith can change the world. That when you decide someone else matters, when you choose to stand with them instead of walking away, that's when everything changes." Hope studied the coins. "Did you ever regret it? All the fighting?" Elena closed the box carefully. "Every single day. And I'd do it all again without hesitation." "Why?" Elena looked at her daughter. "Because some things are worth fighting for. This land, this family, the freedom to build a life on your own terms. If I'd given up, none of this would exist. You wouldn't exist." Hope nodded slowly. "I think I understand." "Good. Because someday you'll have to fight for something that matters. And when that day comes, I want you to remember that you come from people who didn't quit, who stood up even when they were terrified, who bet everything on each other and won." Elena lived to see her grandchildren. 5 of them, running wild across the ranch, climbing trees, chasing cattle, filling the valley with noise and life. Rhett died first, peacefully in his sleep at 73. Elena held his hand as he went, telling him one last time about the 2 silver dollars. About the best investment he'd ever made. She followed him 2 years later. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. She wasn't afraid. She'd faced worse than death. She'd faced humiliation, poverty, violence, corruption, and she'd won. Death was just the last door. Her final words were simple. Don't quit. Whatever happens, don't quit. And then she was gone. They buried her beside Rhett on a hill overlooking the valley. At the funeral, people came from across Montana. Old ranchers who remembered the fight against hail. Young families who'd built their lives on land that Elena's courage had saved. The governor sent a representative. The newspaper ran a front-page story. But what mattered most was the monument they added to the town square. Not a statue or a plaque, but something practical. A community fund established with donations from everyone in the valley. Money set aside to help desperate people, to give them the chance Elena had been given. They called it the $2 fund, because that's all it took to change a life. $2 and the faith that someone was worth saving. The fund still exists today. It's helped hundreds of families over the generations, and every person who receives help hears the story. About a broken rancher and an unwanted bride who refused to quit, who turned $2 silver into a legacy that outlasted them both. Because that's the thing about courage. It's contagious. One person stands up, and suddenly it's easier for the next person to stand, and then the next, until an entire valley is standing together, refusing to be broken. Elena understood that. She understood that power doesn't come from money or force or fear. Real power comes from ordinary people choosing to be extraordinary, choosing to fight when fighting seems impossible, choosing to believe in each other when nobody else will. That's what the $2 silver represent. Not a price, but a promise. That every person has value, that everyone deserves a chance, that the world can change when we decide to change it. Elena and Rhett didn't set out to be heroes. They set out to survive. But in surviving, they showed everyone around them what was possible. They proved that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and choosing to stand back up anyway. Years after Elena's death, her granddaughter stood in the same spot where Elena had once stood on that saloon stage. But this time, she was giving a speech to the Montana Territorial Assembly, arguing for reforms to protect family farms. She wore a silver locket around her neck. Inside were 2 old coins worn smooth with age. When someone asked her about the locket after the speech, she smiled. These belong to my grandmother. They're a reminder that the smallest things can change everything. That courage doesn't require wealth or power, just the willingness to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. What's the story? The person asked. And she told them. About a desperate man with $2 silver, about a woman nobody wanted, about a valley that learned to fight back, about love and courage and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. It's a story that still gets told around fires in Montana, a story about what's possible when ordinary people decide they're worth fighting for, when they choose each other over comfort, hope over fear, action over acceptance. Elena's life wasn't perfect. Neither was Rhett's. They made mistakes, faced defeats, carried scars they never fully healed. But they kept going. And in keeping going, they built something that lasted. That's the lesson they left behind. Not that life is easy, or that good always triumphs, or that justice comes without cost. The lesson is simpler and harder than that. Sometimes the world breaks you. Sometimes the system is rigged. Sometimes powerful people will try to crush you because they can. But if you find someone willing to stand beside you, if you find people who believe in the same better future, then you have something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something stronger than any force that stands against you. $2 silver bought Elena her freedom, but love, courage, and community bought her a life. And in the end, that's what matters. Not the price we paid, but what we built with it. The ranch still stands, owned now by Elena's great-grandchildren. The barn has been rebuilt twice. The cattle are descended from stock Elena and Rhett bought over a century ago. The valley is different now. Electricity, telephones, automobiles, but the spirit remains the same. People still help each other, still stand together when something threatens them. Still remember the story of the woman who cost $2 silver and changed everything. Because some stories don't end. They just get passed down generation to generation, reminding us of who we can be when we choose courage over comfort. Elena and Rhett's story is one of those stories. And as long as people remember it, as long as they tell it around fires and dinner tables and town halls, the fight for dignity and justice and basic human decency continues. $2 silver, One desperate gamble, a lifetime of courage. That's how you change the world. Not with armies or fortunes or power, but with faith in each other. With the stubborn belief that everyone deserves a chance. With the courage to stand up when everyone else sits down. That's the legacy Elena left. Not in monuments or headlines, but in the lives she touched and the courage she inspired. And that legacy will never die. Because courage, like love, multiplies when shared. One person's bravery becomes another's inspiration. One family's fight becomes a valley's revolution. One story becomes a legend that reminds us all of what's possible. When Elena stood on that stage in 1873, humiliated and hopeless, she couldn't have imagined what came next. The cattle drives, the confrontations, the courtroom battles, the love she'd find, the family she'd build, the legacy she'd leave. She just knew she couldn't give up. And that was enough. That's always been enough. That's the truth at the heart of her story. The truth that kept her going through every impossible situation, every terrifying moment, every day that seemed like it might be her last. You don't need to know how it ends. You just need to keep going. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to be faithful to yourself, to the people you love, to the vision of a better world. That's what Elena taught everyone who knew her. And that's what her story still teaches today. So the next time you feel small, worthless, defeated, remember Elena. Remember that she was all those things too. And she still won. Not because she was special, but because she chose to be. And you can make that same choice. Every single day. That's the power we all carry. The power Elena discovered on that cold Montana night when a broken rancher saw her worth and bet his last $2 on it. The power to choose courage over comfort. The power to stand when it's easier to fall. The power to believe that we're worth fighting for. That's what those two silver dollars represent. And that's what they'll always represent. Not a price, but a promise. That everyone has value. That everyone deserves a chance. That love and courage can change the world. Elena knew it. Rhett knew it. And now you know it too. So go fight for something that matters. Stand up for someone who needs it. Build something that will outlast you. Because that's how we honor their memory. Not by remembering their story, but by living our own. With courage. With love, with the stubborn faith that tomorrow can be better than today. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's the truth. 2 silver dollars bought a bride, but courage bought a future. And that future is still unfolding, still being written, still waiting for people brave enough to believe in it. People like Elena, people like Rhett, people like you. So don't quit. Whatever you're facing, whoever stands against you, whatever odds you're fighting, don't quit, because you're worth fighting for. You're worth $2 and so much more. You're worth everything.